My name is Sarah, standing at the back of my bustling restaurant, with laughter spilling through the windows like music. I find myself in a haze of stillness. Tears well up in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of healing. This is the life I've built, a place where strangers become family and forgotten souls finally feel seen. But it wasn't always like this. It all started when I asked my mom about my brother Henry's engagement party. Her response stung like a slap in the face. It's a get-together. We don't really need you there. It wasn't about not being able to come or limited seats. I simply wasn't needed. I stared at my phone, the text illuminating the screen, a cruel reminder of how little I mattered in their world. Growing up in a well-to-do family in a small town, I was the quiet, unassuming daughter. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were well known in the community. My father was a successful lawyer, always busy with high-profile cases, and my mother was deeply involved in society events. They were used to getting what they wanted, and they often took my compliance for granted. Henry, my younger brother, was their golden child. Everything he did was celebrated, and he was showered with love and resources. After that heart-breaking text, I made a decision on a whim. I packed a small bag, booked a last-minute solo trip to the coast, and left without a word. I needed an escape from the constant neglect. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I slept in a bed free of the memories that haunted my childhood room. I walked barefoot along the shoreline, listening to the rhythmic sound of the waves. I ate breakfast alone in a tiny, out-of-the-way cafe where no one knew me. But the peace was short-lived. My phone started buzzing incessantly. At first, it was one call, then 5, and soon 32. Mom, Dad, and even Henry's fiancée, Lily, were calling. Then came the flood of messages. Please come back. Something happened. We need you. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Was I supposed to be afraid or vindicated? A message from my cousin, Ava, finally put things into perspective. They should have never treated you like that. Now they're begging you to come home. You need to see this. I knew then that something had gone horribly wrong at the party that didn't need me. As the hours passed, the number of missed calls kept climbing. By the afternoon, it was up to 57. And then a video arrived. There was my mom screaming in terror. The phone was shaking, the scene chaotic. Behind her, flames were devouring the sky, and guests were crying in panic. Henry, in his tuxedo, was hunched over, throwing up near a burning archway. I recognized the place at once. It was the family mansion, the one my parents always claimed they couldn't afford to maintain, right before they helped Henry buy his second luxury condo. A voice memo from Dad followed. His voice sounded rough, as if he had aged 20 years in a matter of hours.
Please, just call me.
We're all at the hospital. It's about your brother. And the police, they're asking for you. The word police sent a shiver down my spine. What could I possibly have to do with this? Then I remembered something. 2 weeks ago, in the dead of night, I had signed a legal document and submitted it online. It was a secret from my family, something they had no idea about. I realized that whatever it was they relied on, it was now in my name. My solo trip suddenly felt less like an escape and more like a ticking time bomb. They weren't calling me for comfort. They were calling because they knew I held the key to their problems. When I arrived at the hospital, the waiting room felt like a scene from a slow-motion funeral. The air was thick with tension and sorrow. My mom, the woman who had always told me I was too emotional for important family events, ran towards me, as if I was her salvation. "Oh, thank God," she sobbed. "Sarah, we didn't know. We didn't know it was your name on the venue contract." I stared at her, deadpan. "You mean the contract I paid for?" She faltered, her lips trembling. "I thought you were just helping with the paperwork." I could see the panic and calculation in her eyes. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. The truth was, 6 months ago, I had quietly bought the family mansion under an LLC. I had worked with lawyers they didn't even know I'd hired. While they were busy planning Henry's lavish engagement party, I was taking control of my own future. That meant the fire that broke out during the party? The liability was mine to report. The insurance? Mine to claim. And Any legal investigation? I was the one who had to answer for it. Is Henry okay? I finally asked. Mom nodded. Smoke inhalation, but there are talks of lawsuits. Guests are threatening to sue. We just need you to say you loaned the space. I pulled out a folder filled with proof of ownership, permits, and fire inspection dates. This isn't a loan, I said firmly. This is a reckoning. Dad, standing behind my mom, looked as pale as a sheet. He knew exactly what was in that folder and what was about to happen. He didn't say a word, just stared at the folder in my hands as if it were a ticking bomb. I sat down across from him and started flipping through the papers slowly. This, I said, tapping the permit copy, proves the venue is under my ownership as of 6 months ago. And this, I slid another paper across the table, is the invoice I sent your assistant 2 weeks before the party. Unpaid. He flinched. I thought we agreed you'd help cover. I cut him off. You assumed I'd donate, like always. Just like when you used my savings to pay for Henry's first car, or when Mom told the lawyer to remove my name from Grandpa's inheritance, or when Carl borrowed my laptop and never returned it. I leaned forward. You've all mistaken my silence for generosity. Dad's hands curled into fists. This isn't the time, Sarah. Wrong, I said. It's exactly the time. From my bag, I pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a legal cease and desist notice. You will not use my property for any future events. You will not reference me, my business, or my name in relation to this incident. And if I hear that you've spun this to shift blame, I will sue for defamation and I will win. His jaw tightened and a red flush crept up his neck. But Henry is your brother. He nearly died. You're punishing all of us. I stood up.
No.
You punished yourselves. I just stopped playing along. And with that, I walked away, leaving them behind in the hospital waiting room. The fallout was swift. That evening, I got a text from Carl. Really? You're turning this into a lawsuit?
Wow.
There was no concern for me, just pure entitlement. I didn't reply. Instead, I quietly hired a PR firm to protect the venue's reputation and my name. The next morning, I received an email from the venue insurance representative. Hi, Sarah. This is to confirm the incident was caused by faulty wiring brought in by an outside vendor your family hired. You are not liable. Best regards. I let out a breath. I didn't know I was holding. The fire and the disaster were all on them. It turned out that the vendor had been recommended by Lily, the same woman who had called me a selfish career-driven person at the Christmas dinner last year. Now, they were scrambling to deal with legal costs, medical expenses, and a public relations crisis. They had never bothered to check if they were covered by my insurance policy because they always assumed they could take advantage of me. 2 days later, my father showed up at the cafe where I sometimes worked. He didn't order anything or sit down. He just sat across from me and said quietly, "We're not bad people, Sarah. We were just celebrating Henry. We didn't mean to hurt you." I looked up from my laptop. "You didn't mean to hurt me, Dad. You just didn't care if you did." He didn't respond, and I didn't give him the chance to. I knew there was a difference between burning bridges and building a fire to keep myself warm. By Friday, I decided to do something I had never thought possible. I reopened my restaurant, not for business or for guests, but for me. I lit a single candle on table 7, the table I had reserved for my family on the grand opening day, the same one that had remained empty. I sat down with a plate of lemon pasta, a glass of wine, and a silence that tasted like healing. The door was locked. Soft jazz music filled the air, and the warm smell of rosemary and freshly baked bread wafted through the room. Every flicker of the candle reminded me that they had missed out on this. They had chosen to prioritize Carl's social status over my well-being. Now, Carl was trending on local news, not for a promotion, but for possible negligence. One of the guests he had invited to the party had posted an Instagram story during the fire, tagging the vendor and joking about skipping permits. The video had gone viral. My lawyer said I could use it to my advantage, but I didn't want revenge. I just needed space. That weekend, I posted an update on my business page. To everyone who's ever been overlooked, unseen, or erased, this place is for you. We're reopening next Friday. Soft music, real food, no fake smiles. Come as you are. The post exploded. People from all walks of life reached out, sharing their stories of being the black sheep, the forgotten sibling, or the backup friend. They said they would come. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of wholeness. The line outside my restaurant wrapped around the block. Strangers, old classmates, single moms with toddlers, and gray-haired couples holding hands were all waiting for a table. Mid-shift, my phone buzzed with a photo from Ava. It was a picture of my parents' house. Carl was standing on the porch, Henry was pacing in the background, and Mom was sitting on the steps, her head in her hands. The caption read, "They're fighting again. Mom keeps saying, you should have invited her tonight." I stared at the image. These were the people who hadn't bothered to support my dreams, and now they wanted to be a part of my success. But they were no longer the center of my world. I didn't reply. As the night came to an end, and I locked the restaurant, I stepped into the soft hum of city silence. A woman was waiting by the gate. She looked familiar, older, and tired, holding a wrapped box in her hands. "Sarah," she said, "I used to babysit you. Your mom told me you opened this place. I just wanted to see it once." I opened the door again for her. Because not every visitor from the past comes to take. Some come to remind you that you were always meant to rise. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. There was no return address, just my name handwritten in shaky ink. Inside was a single folded sheet. "Sarah, we didn't realize what we were doing until you stopped answering. Until the restaurant photos started flooding the family chat. Until people kept saying, you must be so proud of her." And we had to lie. We weren't there when it counted, and I don't expect forgiveness. But if you ever decide to let us sit at your table again, we'll come early, we'll stay late, and we'll bring our own chairs. Dad. I read it a few times, then folded it neatly and placed it in the bottom drawer of my office, under receipts, old menus, and a paper flower a customer's child had given me. I didn't respond because closure doesn't always require a confrontation. My restaurant is more than just a business. It's a place where I've reclaimed my voice, where I can think clearly, and where people choose to be a part of my new, found family. And as I stand here, surrounded by the laughter and warmth of my guests, I know I've built a life so full and true that there's no room for the ones who left me out in the cold.